folks, at least for us to get started. Thank you all for joining us today. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, I'll give a very brief introduction to what this community of practice is and what we hope to accomplish together in this next hour. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Carlos Diaz. I'm a director at Hathaway Communications. And along with my colleagues at Hathaway, we serve as the secretariat for the STAT communications community. This community grew out of the work of the State and Territory Alliance for Testing, a group of 26 states and territories convened by the Rockefeller Foundation, who share insights, best practices, successful strategies, and lessons learned on all aspects of the COVID response. The goal for expanding this community and the motivation for these bi-weekly meetings, as it has been for almost a year now, is to bring the same spirit of collaboration that has made STAT such a success to the broader community working on COVID communications. The second motivation is to bring the same rigor and science that informs other aspects of the response to strategic communications and outreach and engagement. That's why we're very excited today about today's conversation topic on COVID-19 testing in schools and talk through guidance for engaging communities. What we'll be hearing about today is after a year-long project with pilot cities, Mathematica, and the Rockefeller Foundation released on Monday new guidance on how to develop strong testing programs that keep kids safe and learning at school based on practices and lessons shared from 335 school-based testing sites in 6 pilot cities nationwide. That's why we're joined today here by representatives from the Rockefeller Foundation, Mathematica, CORE, and a pilot school to share lessons about communicating and engaging communities in successful testing programs. Today, we'll be hearing from Leah Perkinson, Manager of Pandemics in the Health Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. We also have Ken Cherry, Chief of Staff at the Friendship School in Washington, D.C. We have So O'Neill, Director of Philanthropy Portfolio at Mathematica. And we have Kim Coleman, Area Manager in Washington, D.C.'s COVID-19 response programs at CORE. So they'll be sharing today information on how to partner with external vendors and build a relationship for success, how to effectively communicate with students, parents, and administrators about routine testing, and just more specific techniques for integrating testing into everyday school routines. As we go through our presentation today, I really encourage you to leave your thoughts, experiences, or questions either in the Q&A box or in the chat box, whichever you prefer. We'll be collecting them as we go, and we'll be gathering up questions and sharing them towards the end of the hour. With that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Leah Perkinson right now from the.
Thanks so much, Carlos. It is great to be here with everyone. I spend most of my time at Rockefeller working with grantees who do testing in schools. So I can speak for everybody at Rockefeller when I say it is a real honor and privilege to work with these grantees and folks who are not grantees, because you're doing this life-changing and life-saving work. So I think, as many of you know, Rockefeller has been a strong proponent of school-based testing. 1 year ago, we funded Duke Margolis and Johns Hopkins to develop testing protocols for K-12, because at that point, there wasn't guidance on how do you actually do testing. So that was released in October of 2020. We knew that we wanted to learn the extent to which doing testing as recommended was feasible and acceptable in schools. So to that end, we convened 6 pilot sites. So these are districts and local health departments from Rhode Island, DC, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Louisville, and Tulsa. And as Carlos said, over the course of the last school year, they did testing at 335 schools. So the lessons learned around feasibility and acceptability over the last school year were documented and are reported in the Mathematica report that was released on Monday. So we're going to put that into the chat. Again, we worked with these schools over the course of the last school year to collect their lessons learned, successes, challenges. We also use that data to inform version 2.0 of the protocols. So now we have much more operational guidance that's based in the everyday realities of school life. So, and we'll put that in the chat too. That's called the K12 Testing Playbook. One of our pilot sites was Friendship Public Charter Schools, and they're based in DC. what Rockefeller wanted to do is pair Core, who's a testing vendor, with Friendship to co-develop a school-based model that was replicable and sustainable. So this is a testing model that other people could do if they wanted to. So the way that this got codified is really in a video. It's almost a mini documentary, and we'll put that in the chat. So the video serves two purposes. One is to explain, describe what this testing model looks like. And the second is to really socialize testing for folks that may be unfamiliar with it, really to kind of decrease barriers to access, basically, just to say, look, testing is not this big, hairy, scary monster. It's actually something that you can do, and we could do it together. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Ken, Chief of Staff at Friendship. He's going to talk about how testing has played out in Friendship, and will also share the communication assets that he and his team have developed to increase buy-in to testing.
Thank you, Leah, for that introduction. And I'm actually going to start off a little bit, instead of talking a little bit, I'm going to actually ask Caroline to show one of the videos that we curated during the past year, specifically targeted towards our teachers. But I thought it would be kind of good background to, one, the story that I'll tell afterwards with respect to how we ended up with our relationship with CORE, and then, like I said, 3 lessons learned regarding communication. So Caroline, if you can show that video, that'd be great.
Learning hubs are campus-based opportunities where we have a very small amount of children, anywhere between 4 to 9 students, supervised and monitored by 2 adults in a classroom, where the students are allowed the opportunity to come to campus and sit in the classroom. They're still receiving all their distance learning via technology, whether it's a Chromebook or an iPad, and they're able to be supervised and supported by the staff members here. We're actually stationed on opposite ends of the room. The table where I work from is over there. The desk that she works from is over there. So we're able to keep distance from ourselves as well as the scholars, but still able to maintain monitoring them. So we're still able to maintain the guidelines and then still enforce that the students are following the guidelines as well, in addition to being able to still fulfill the tasks needed. They're maintaining to that very strict ratio, maintaining to the CDC guidelines, which makes it very comfortable and very safe. So they bring in outside company that administers COVID tests weekly, where we get our results to ensure that we are COVID negative. In addition to that, every day, every staff member is required to log into a website and do a COVID assessment. So we're required to answer a series of questions to ensure that we're meeting the guidelines and mandates as required, which ranges from asking about symptoms to travel history to possible exposure. And when we arrive on campus, everyone's required to show the badge. Everyone who enters the building, whether they're part of the Learning Hub or even a contractor, is required to use hand sanitizer as well as have their temperature taken. So there's a lot of safety protocols that have been put in place. So every student, as they walk into whatever their designated entrance is, are required to get temperature checks. In addition, one of the protocols that we have in place is there is a sheet that asks scholars similar questions to what we as staff answer via the COVID assessment. So they're required to read them all, sign it and initial it. And then that happens first thing in the morning when they come in prior to getting breakfast. So that's just part of the protocol that we implemented as well. I was really comfortable with the thinking and the planning that had gone into possibly facilitating the Learning Hub. And so now here I am, a pod lead. I feel extremely comfortable. I feel like they continue to put greater safety measures and protocols in place. We are able to give ample feedback, and especially now that I'm seeing the impact that it's having on these families directly, I definitely say it's safe, we're comfortable, We are doing everything that we're supposed to in terms of safety guidelines. And obviously, if I didn't feel that way, you guys would definitely know. But it's a great opportunity, and our kids need it, and our families deserve it.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, Ms. Gomes. So interesting backstory. She was one of our individuals, our teachers, who was probably most vocal about us coming back in person. So I'll talk to you a little bit later on how that connected to some of our communications strategies. But just to give you a little bit of a backstory, like many school districts around the nation, we too started virtually this past school year, but we knew after listening to many of our families that that wasn't an option for some of our folks. We knew that some of our families were first responders. We knew that some of our families needed a safe and maybe more respectful, kind of responsible place for their students to participate in distance learning. And then some just, needed to be with other students in their classrooms. So we quickly, by week 2, set up learning hubs, which is what you saw in the video there, for about 3% of our population, a few hundred students. And we did that across 5 campuses. And as Ms. Gomes said, we had all of our mitigation strategies in place, and we really felt like our buildings were safe opportunities for our students. Within 2 months, because our parents continued to contact us about expanding learning hubs, we did just that. And that video was an example of that, where we went from 5 learning hubs to 8 learning hubs across Friendship Public Charter School. And like I said, kept reiterating our mitigation strategies, but we knew that as we continue to expand our learning hubs and bring in more students, that we had to add another element to kind of our mitigation strategies, and that was really testing, because we really lived with the belief that testing keeps your building open. So the more we know about our adults who are coming into buildings, the more we know about our kids that were in the buildings, the more that we could reassure our families that our buildings would be open to them. So right around that November time period, we began to have conversations with CORE, and we were really, really excited about the opportunity to join in with the other 6 kind of LEAs or organizations around the country to implement rapid antigen testing with our students. And we did just that. So by Thanksgiving, we were so excited because we had developed a 3-day walk-up, drive-up clinic where we were going to do that across 3 of our sites. And we did just that. So it was cold, and we had heaters, and we had everything that we thought we knew we should be doing. Mind you, we're a school district. So, I was trained to be a teacher. I was trained to be a principal and eventually an administrator here at central office. Couldn't kind of pronounce most of the words that were medically on the boxes that were sent to me. Many of the conversations I sat in, I you fake it till you make it, as they say. You smile and you keep agreeing, and so forth. But we were really, really excited. And over that 3-day period, we were able to test 100 students. So for us, that was a huge step forward in our mitigation process to let folks know that they were safe and to be in the building. And then that continued on into January. We had also set up another testing cycle after the winter break. We wanted to make sure that we tested our adults and students prior to opening up the learning hubs. We did set that up, but because of the insurrection and things that were happening in Washington, D.C., we unfortunately only were able to do 1 out of the 3 days. But out of that came this wonderful partnership that we had with CORE. And I remember that was a really busy month, and Kim can probably attest to that because I remember we were probably on our 2nd call. Maybe it was a fairly lengthy conference call, and we finally ended with me saying, and if my boss is on here, she might fire me, but I basically said at one point in time, my boss is going to come into my office and she's going to look at me and she's going to say, when is testing happening? So if Kim remembers, we drew a line in the sand and we said, all right, by the end of January, we will have student testing centers open at all of our campuses, and we will have regular routine testing going on. And we did it. So lots of bumps and bruises along the way and lots of Band-Aids, but by the end of January, we were doing just that. We had established through this partnership student testing rooms at all of our campuses, not only for the students, but also for the adults. And over that time, and since that time, we've kind of built this cadence of about 400 to 500 tests per week that we were testing. We had testing rooms that consisted of 4 stations, from registration to testing to the samples, and then to obviously data collection. And then we also had a team that would go from building to building. So often doing 2 buildings a day and then rotating throughout the week. So we were really just super excited about our testing program, and it continues today. So what Core was able to teach us during that time and then leave us after about 4 to maybe 5 weeks. I think we begged you to stay on for an extra week or 2. We weren't really ready to take the training wheels off yet. But like I said, we were able to kind of continue on and replicate that across all of our buildings. And it's nice to know that even now during our summer learning opportunity, where we have about 1,200 students who are now participating in our in-person learning, that those student testing and adult testing centers are up and running. So when I think back and with respect to communications and what I think some of the drivers are to success was, we knew early on, one, we needed to plan to over communicate. So, especially during this time, Friendship serves about 4,500 students. We have about a 67 to 70% at-risk population. A majority of our students, if you're familiar with Washington, D.C., live in wards 7 and 8. Which they call across the river. And those were definitely the communities that were seeing COVID spread rapidly through their communities. And they were sometimes the communities that were not as responsive to testing. And as we're seeing right now, even with the vaccine. So, when you plan to over communicate, I think what you're doing is you're building in a regular cadence, and you're also building an audience. Through that process. And through that audience, they'll then begin to look to you for information, they're going to look to you for direction, and they're going to look for you for advice. And for us, that plan to over communicate happened on a weekly basis, and something we called Learning Without Limits. And that's really because of our second driver, which is we needed to operationalize our communication strategy. So it's different to say, hey, every week I'm going to write a plan. We actually spent the time to sit down and to name the who, the what, the when, the where. How are we going to do this? What's the medium that we're going to do this with? And actually put dates on calendar. So we're going to over communicate, and we have it all written out, and we have it planned. And I think our third big takeaway is we wanted to make sure that we had influencers that were part of that regular cadence. So as you can see there, Miss Gomes, as I said early on, was someone who was not really a proponent of returning to in-person learning, did not believe it would be safe for students, and did not believe it would be safe for adults. So to see her by November on camera, really communicating to who? Other teachers, communicating to who? Other adults. Who was sitting in the background? Our students. Where was it conducted at? In the classroom. Was really important to us. So, I think back on a teaching strategy I had with my own students in the classroom. Before we did any type of writing, we did what we called FAT-P, form, audience, topic, and purpose. And so audience can never be overlooked, because your audience lets you know the language I need to use, how I need to communicate, who needs to communicate. So in that particular video, and then actually I think some of the videos we'll share with you later on for you to look at, that making sure that we use parents, making sure that we use teachers. Some of our videos had the nurses that were actually testing. So for me to get on a video and say, hey, our buildings are safe, and to be quite honest with you, would have no meaning to the families that are watching this, or to the staff who are watching it, given who I am and my role within the organization. So again, like I said, I would say that some of our communication strategies were, like I said, plan to over communicate, make sure it's operationalized so that everybody understands the cadence by which you're going to do it, and then make sure that you have the influencers who have the relationships with the people that you're trying to reach, communicating those messages. So thank you for sharing our Learning Hub story and how we've been communicating with our families.
Thank you so much, Ken. I mean, I think one of the things that I've heard from Friendship and Ken and the team throughout the year is just how community-based rather than community-placed these communication efforts are. So what I wanted to do is hand it over to So O'Neill at Mathematica. So again, Friendship was one of 6 pilot sites. The other sites come from Rhode Island, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Louisville, and Tulsa. And I wondered, so if you could speak a little bit about the role that communications played in getting buy-in across these sites.
Sure, I can do that, Leah. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me here. As Leah mentioned, we were the learning partners for the K12 Testing Protocol Demonstration Project, and it was implemented in 335 schools between September 2020 and June 2021. These pilot sites administered nearly 200,000 COVID tests. Many of them were Binax Now, 140,000 were Binax Now from the US Department of Health and Human Services. And then there were other rapid antigen PCR tests procured by state officials and school districts. So as Leah mentioned, I'm here to pull out from that report learnings that were particular to communications strategies to gain buy-in into testing programs in schools. Ken and Kim already showed a really great mode for delivering the communications, and I'm going to kind of riff off of Ken and highlight the messengers and message content considerations to increase staff, parent, and student buy-in into testing at the pilot sites. So, in terms of trusted messengers across these 6 sites, folks like Ken, principals, as well as other community leaders, including school district officials, seem to be the ones that could get the message traction in terms of the buy-in and have the trust to be able to deliver the messages that would be accepted by staff, parents, and teachers. So these are folks that interact with staff, parents, students day to day, and are always seen as having their best interest at heart. But the other trusted messengers as well that came up were trusted authorities, so maybe school district officials that may not interact day to day, or public health officials that are seen as credible sources of medical information. So, in DC, we're talking about individuals like Ken has been giving out these messages, has been key to the success, but there are also those outside of school community leaders that can amplify messages, and Ken mentioned that as well, who have entree into the community. And one of the other things that was noted in terms of at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, it was also noted that having strong leadership buy-in in testing sites and having a very supportive and communicative leader communicating the messages was really effective for them. They got participation rates among students as high as 90%. So you can see that the messenger is fairly important and can give you the results of having buy-in. Most sites noted that key stakeholders understand are comfortable with details of their routine testing program. If they were comfortable with it now in the past year, they're more likely to support continued testing in the coming school year. So consider that like if you already had messengers that were trusted and communicating about last year's routine school testing, and you got support, and that momentum can continue and those messengers can be leveraged again. And then another type of messenger, which was very interesting that was brought up, was medical staff, especially those with pediatric experience. Some schools hired them to administer the tests, and these folks with the pediatric experience are able, they have capacity and skills in interacting and interfacing with parents and kids, and we're able to put parents and students at ease with testing. So that was another trusted messenger that could help increase buy-in in the upcoming school year. And now I'm going to move on to thinking about the content of the messaging. And across the board, all the pilot sites have found that consistency in messaging is really important. And you can imagine this in light of some of the confusing messaging that may be coming out at other levels these days. So, you know, this consistency in testing and in messaging translates into consistency in how testing is implemented. For example, if the schedule for testing, who administers the test, and so on, if that messaging, the content of that messaging is the same, people are comfortable already with the schedule of testing, who has been administering the test, and so on in the past school year, they're going to be comfortable with it this school year, and they want to be sure that they understand, and they already understand kind of the testing protocol. So the consistency in messaging also translates into implementation, was another key point I want to highlight here. And then the other piece that has been important in the content of the messaging is addressing misconceptions. Sites highlighted this, and you all have probably talked about this in previous meetings, but I wanted to mention it again as something that's important in terms of message content to gain buy-in. So I'm just going to conclude and say that for the fall, and implications for the fall in terms of what we learned throughout this report, and I will quote from the report here, is that the same messengers that were trusted before can now be used to proactively make the case for why routine testing still matters, to answer questions or address common misconceptions about testing before the next school year begins, and to set the stage for high participation in routine testing in the fall. So that is it for me. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you. So again, what's so covered, you can find more, do a double click in the report that Mathematica released on Monday. I mean, the challenge with consistency in messaging, well, we've seen that play out at the most renowned public health agency in the world, at the CDC. You know, they need to be responsive to what's happening. And, you know, for example, the masking messaging, that had to change a number of times because they're responding to what's going on. So easier said than done in some cases, but so thank you so much for that recap. I wanted to turn it over to Kim Coleman from CORE in DC. Again, CORE was paired with Friendship to co-develop a testing model. So the way that this happened, so testing there's so many different ways it can play out, right? And on one end of the continuum is end-to-end vendor that does everything, as long as you have a testing program. On the other end of the continuum is do-it-yourself. So Friendship was more on the do-it-yourself continuum right now. So what happened was CORE came to the table and helped to increase the capacity for Friendship to do testing on their own. And in the process, they co-developed this testing model. In some cases, the vendor continues to stay with the school, but in this case, CORE was more of like a catalyst to increase capacity to do testing. So I wanted to turn it over to Kim to talk about some of the successes, challenges, lessons learned from a vendor's perspective, working with a network of schools. And this is becoming more and more, I think, relevant with the ELC funding, with Operation Expanded Testing. Many more schools have access to resources to leverage testing. So many more schools are going to be working with vendors. You know, we'll hear from Kim, and then I want to turn it back over to Ken for some of the criteria to look for when you're thinking about working with a vendor. Kim right now will talk about how that relationship played out on the ground. So over to you, Kim.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Hi, my name is Kim Coleman. I'm going to just briefly let you know that my background is in public health and in education, specifically higher education. And so when Rockefeller came to CORE, which stands for Community Organized Relief Effort, a nonprofit out of Los Angeles, I was delighted because I was like, oh, this is great. I've been sweating myself to death out on the front lines doing testing in DC, and now I get to actually get back into my education roots. And so I want to talk a little bit about, like Leah said, the successes, challenges, and lessons learned. And I think the first success that I would start with is that education, public health, and humanitarian response really are not strange bedfellows. We are, especially in the terms of this pandemic, we have got to rely on each other and learn how to work collaboratively with each other. Ken said, he went to school to be, a school administrator. Some of those words he looked at, he was like, huh? But on the other hand, I'm in public health. And so looking at what we have done with CORE in doing COVID testing in mobile situations, in static situations, it actually melded very well with the model or the task assignment that was put before us by Leah, which was help develop an infrastructure and then build up the capacity for the school staff so that we can step away, we being CORE, and the school is self-sufficient. And I will tell you that it has been a very complementary relationship to see those disciplines, if you will, come together. I think the second success is that you can't be I don't want to say put it in negative terms, but you have to be creative in this. There is no straight recipe. So don't be afraid to think outside of the box as long as you are still within the regulations of FERPA and then whatever CDC is recommending. But don't be afraid to be creative and to say, okay, well, we thought we were going to do, when we came in, we thought we were going to use food as an incentive. At least I did, because I'm a little bit older, so I thought we could use lollipops, and and I found out really quickly that that is actually not acceptable these days. But I listened to those nurses, and the nurses told us about the stickers. And when they said that, I said, oh, this is great. I was a dollar store, Amazon sticker buying fool. And we had all types. And what I found was that not only did the younger kids enjoy the stickers, but the older kids enjoyed the stickers as well. They would ask, where's my sticker? Oh, okay. I know you're a senior in high school, but okay. And we even put or developed stickers, had stickers printed out with CORE that said, I got tested for COVID, so that when they would get tested, they got that. That was an extra sticker that they got. Challenges. I think the first challenge that I would say is really delineating all of the roles and responsibilities so everybody is clear as early as possible. There was a lot that we had to figure out from the beginning. And so one of those things was who was going to be responsible as the lab director, which is a key role in getting approval. And initially we thought that I was going to be the lab director until we found out through the city that person was going to have to be on the testing site at each school every day. Well, the goal was that we needed to pull out. So then we had to sit down and talk with Friendship and say, all right, so who is going to take this massive responsibility of being the lab, quote unquote, lab director? And after some discussion, turned out that it was Diane Harris, who's a director of health programs at Friendship, and she has done a magnificent job in that role. And it's wonderful to see how she's grown and learned more about that program. And so delineating those roles and responsibilities, I think as early as possible will help in getting things organized so that when you leave, you're not necessarily trying to guess. Make sure that your vendor gets all the information that is needed or requested as early as possible. There were some things, some hiccups, challenges about the school schedule, and even looking at the different site schedules or different campus schedules. Friendship has 8 different campuses, and they all have a different schedule. So one of the things that I said very early on was, whatever we do, I want to make sure that we cause as little disruption to the instructional day. And so trying to make sure that we got all of that as early as possible and as soon as possible was a little challenging at first, and trying to then, that actually helped. Once we got it, helped me to be able to map out a schedule so that we could get to all 8 schools in the course of a week and not disrupt instruction unnecessarily. There are a lot of lessons learned, but I'm going to stick to just one here, and it's have a clear understanding of the school's culture and a thorough understanding of any previous guidance or methods that have been used as soon as possible. There were quite a few things that we didn't know going in, that Friendship had a lot of feedback. And some of it was good feedback, and some of it was feedback that didn't quite work. And so we don't want to recreate the wheel, and we don't want to overly frustrate the institution or the school. And so it's very important to make sure that your vendor understands the culture of the schools, and also understands what you've done, what you've been told, what kind of statutes or stipulations have been made on you, especially if you're dealing with a school board or something like that. You're not an independent school. Last thing I was asked to talk about was how the model is being replicated. So a pilot was done at a DC adult public charter school that primarily had international and immigrant student populations. And I will tell you that the model, one of the great things about it is that it's adaptable. And so for that we did a 2-week pilot, and we got a lot of lessons learned about working with an adult population and working with an immigrant population, where you have to have all of your forms, everything has to be in multiple languages. And then culturally, also understanding that you have to be very clear and work with the school administration closely so that they can help you explain and have it become more of a more routine than a special event, which I will say at Friendship, those kids, they know their schedule, they come in and it's working like clockwork now. You have to do a little bit more work, I think, working especially with non-native speakers, non-native persons. Additional areas for where this program is being replicated is there's potential for expansion. CORE runs a school in Haiti called the School of Hope. And then there's a possibility of Brazil. We're in India right now, but it's actually Brazil that we are looking to actually move this forward. Just today, I got a call from a contact in Robeson County, North Carolina, and they also are now interested. And then I'm currently outreaching to other school systems and individual schools to not only share the Mathematica report, but also to share that full-length video. And I do encourage you to take a look at the full video. I'm gonna cut it right now because I know we're short on time, but you, by all means, if you have any questions for me, thanks.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I do want to turn it back over to Ken Great to hear a perspective from a vendor, Kim. I want to turn it over to Ken, sorry, there's a lot of Ks, to see what are the criteria that you would encourage other schools to look for when choosing a vendor?
Yeah, and I'm going to do three. I work in threes a lot. So I think the first and probably the biggest one that you should consider is making sure that your partners or your vendors are mission aligned. Before Friendship was Friendship Public Charter School, we were Friendship House and had many decades here in Washington, D.C. as a social service agency. So and that was part of who our founder was. He was the executive director of Friendship House before he moved over to be the founder of Friendship Public Charter School. So that's really important to us. So when Leah introduced us to CORE, we were really excited to work with them. One, because Kim was from DC. So very important to us as an organization. Again, that social service route comes out. We like to know that we sometimes work with people who understand our community. They understand the difference between, Ward 3 and Ward 8, and a very small city, and they understand the populations in which we serve. So, and we also appreciated CORE's focus too. So their response to pandemic, this is a pandemic response. So, and we were responding in our own way by opening up our own learning hub. So it was great to know that you had two systems who were really, really mission aligned on what they needed to do. I think a second criteria that you need to think about when working with a vendor is, I always say begin with the end in mind. So your vendor needs to understand your North Star. So what are you working towards at the end of the day? And, they need to understand and see how they fit into that North Star and how are they going to help you accomplish that. It's just not partnering up with someone who's going to continue to run their program or to continue to promote what they've done. In this instance, like Kim communicated, we worked together, and there were bumps, there were ups, there was downs, and so forth. But at the end of the day, we were focused on one thing. And again, by the end of January, we would have 8 student testing centers open at all of our campuses, and we would begin regular routine testing. So no matter what the noise was off to the left or to the right, like I said, our North Star was making sure that that was up and running. And I think with any good vendor, my third lesson, it's a graceful dance. You got to know when to lead and you got to know when to follow. And if you choose the right vendor, they'll know when to do that too, because the reason that you select a vendor is because you need some form of assistance in getting to your North Star. So, you don't want to choose a vendor and then continue to be the alpha in the relationship, because all you're going to do is perpetuate what you thought you were going to do anyway. So why have a vendor if that's what if you're not going to take the time to step back, to listen, to participate in their conversation, to see what they bring to the table. So, Leah, I know it's short, but like I said, those would be 3 things that I would tell anyone, because that aligns to your culture, that aligns to finishing the project. So mission aligned, know your North Star, make sure that they can help do that with you. And like I said, be able to know when to lead, and then, like I said, know when to follow.
Thank you so much, Ken, Kim, and Leah, and all of you. Thank you. Before we turn over to Q&A, I do want to share the shortened version of the CORE video that Leah mentioned. I dropped the link for the longer one in the chat, but then I'll preview the short one. And Kim or Leah, anything you want to add about what the purpose of this video was, or?
Well, again, the purpose was to demonstrate how testing plays out in this setting, and then also as a tool to help socialize people who are less familiar with testing to what it can look like in a school setting.
Thank you. Cool.
COVID testing has been very important because there have been stigmas about how this pandemic has affected us. And we really want to ensure our students and staff that we are taking the proper safety protocols to get you back in school, ready to learn and ready to teach.
So we want to make sure that the teachers feel safe coming back in, that the students are safe coming back in, and that the parents or guardians feel safe about sending their children back into the building now.
With funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, CORE developed a station-based model creating efficient and easily replicable testing sites in multiple school buildings. At the beginning of the program, CORE assisted in developing logistics, data management, regulatory compliance, staffing, and training. By March 2021, the program became self-sufficient and run entirely by friendship.
Everyone wants to get kids back into school. We need to get children back into the school building. So it's very important to have this type of model brought to the school so that we can get the kids back.
Thank you, Caroline, for sharing that video. Now I think we're going to go into some Q&A. So please drop the questions you have for Kim, for Leah, for Ken into the Q&A box or in the chat box. I know we had one on early on from Saratoga, and there's been some chatter about it in the chat. Saratoga's question is, any recommendations for schools that aren't able to partner with CORE and who can't access the new HHS Operation Expanded Testing because it's not being offered in their state?
Yeah, so I did see a response to that. Whoever provided the response around Operation Expanded Testing, do you want to share that response live?
I think that was Justine. If you're able
Okay.
to.
Oh yeah, I saw she just put in a chat on for Operation Expanded Testing. Perkin Elmer is the hub for Oregon and Washington and shared a link.
Yeah, so I mean, you bring up a really good question. So there's Operation Expanded Testing funding, and then there's also the ELC funding from CDC. So, you know, and some states have said we do not want the ELC funding, so that can make it very difficult for a school, Sarah, if that is the situation. I don't have an answer to that question. Yeah, I don't, but it's definitely something that we can find out more about. What are the options for folks that can't access the federal funding for whatever reason?
All right, thank you. Another chatter and question I saw while folks were sharing was about culturally competent and multilingual materials. So I'm wondering for our panelists, any resources that you would recommend folks to consult while they're trying to design and tailor their own culturally competent materials?
So I think there's probably, there's more out there than I know about, but I can share one example. It's not live yet, but Johns Hopkins University, they have a strong history of working with tribal communities, and they're developing K-12 testing guidance for tribal communities. So this is very much informed by the community they work with, or communities. So, you know, when I look at their materials, and I'm going to try to find something and put the link in the chat. This is a group, as we all know, so under-resourced historically and underserved, and they've developed materials that are, again, so community-based rather than community-placed, co-developing materials. So I don't think I'm exactly getting at the question, like where are the resources for culturally competent messaging, but it's more of an approach to developing that. But I can, you know, you can go on this website and check it out. I'll try to find it right now.
Thank you. And again, encourage folks to share more questions in the chat box or Q&A box. One question I'd be curious to for especially Kim and Ken, what are some of the most common questions you got from school staff and parents about routine testing?
I guess I'll start. When I first got involved, one of the first things I did was I visited all 8 campuses and primarily met with the COVID monitors. And the question that I got the most was really kind of from the perspective, I think, of the staff wanting to know, how is this going to, I guess, add to my workload, for lack of a better term. And initially, I didn't know. And I will say that as we went along, we were able, this is what I was talking about, those roles, knowing those roles and responsibilities. I was able to understand a lot better the structure of having a COVID monitor at every school, and then identifying who was going to be responsible specifically for doing the pre-registration in the morning. And so and maybe Ken will speak to this, what I've observed now that we're gone is I don't think that it is an extreme burden on the staff who have been kind of assigned to be specifically work with the testing program.
Yeah, I would say for me, from a student point of view, the first question they'll say is it going to hurt? So, and I always laugh and say, well, if you've had a PCR test done, this is much gentler and so forth. So I think, and Kim probably witnessed that much more than I did. So I think from the parents' point of view, it was more about the question why. So making sure that, as we showed in one video, and we have a few more videos that we can share, being able to show them the why. And as we said before, when we told families, this allows us to keep the building open, so, that's why it's important for us. You have asked us to open up our buildings when no one else was doing it. We kept, not only that, we even offered extended daycare. So not only would we have the building open, but we also offered 3 hours of additional service to families, especially those families who had working parents. So, the why was, we need to keep the buildings open. We want to keep them safe. We want to make sure that you're able to tell your friends who might be questioning whether or not they want to come back to school that it is safe and that you can do this. And as Kim said, our students know the schedules now. I mean, they're eager, they're ready. They, if you're at one school and it's Tuesday, they know they're having testing, conducted that day. And it's always a great thing when you see another kid grab another student who might be testing for the first time and say, it's all right, we got this, you're going to be fine, So again, those are your influencers that we talked about earlier when it talks about, informal communication. Those are the things that, again, keep your building open and keep kids coming back for more. So I would say that maybe not necessarily a question on the adult side, but for some of us, our question was, are they running into testing fatigue? So when does testing become too much testing? Mm-hmm. And I think we struck a good balance. So, we really took the time to listen to the adults that were working in our building, because at one point in time we were doing rapid and PCR testing. So, so some, 1 week they were getting the whole gamut, and the next week they were getting the rapid. So I think, what happened was over time, we were able to build enough confidence in the rapid antigen tests, the Buy Next Now, that we actually ended our routine PCR testing and just exclusively do the antigen testing now. So those would be 3 questions, I think, that I heard often.
Thank you. Again, folks, feel free to share any questions you may have. Ken, another thing that you mentioned during your chat about this importance of over communicating with parents and staff, I'm wondering what channels of communications were most effective for you, for both staff and teachers and with parents?
Well, we live in a different generation, I would say. If it was back when I started teaching, the good old ditto and the envelope home, but, social media plays such an important role. Mm-hmm. And especially when you start thinking about TikTok and you think of Instagram, it's those 15-second snapshots, it's those quick hits that you got to do. So I would think for us, even though our Learning Without Limits, I wouldn't say it was lengthy, but certainly had multiple paragraphs, making sure that we were taking advantage of the social media outlets that were most important to our families. So and then also understanding the age range of most of our families too. I think those that really strikes a good balance. So Facebook, Twitter, for old folks like myself, but the TikToks, the Instagrams, that was really that was able to do that. I think another key message there too was, our principals are very connected to the community. So if you really want anything done, the first thing that a family is going to do, they're going to listen to their teacher and their principal at their building. So we also leveraged each one of our principals at our buildings to make sure that they were communicating to families, because they are the ones that were doing the morning meetings with the community, or doing the Facebook chats and so forth. So we utilized, like I said, our principals to really communicate to our families on a routine and regular basis.
Wonderful. I'm wondering, for any of the other panelists, as we close out on time, anything that you all haven't shared yet that you would like to share with our audience while we have them here?
I guess I would just say the last thing is remain flexible and keep a sense of humor. Because we're all stressed enough going through this as individuals and with our own families. And so Ken was talking about, when some of the kids would come in, and initially, we had some tears and some screams, and kids were asking, is it going to hurt? And one of the things that I started saying was, I said, have you ever picked your nose? They looked at me and I said, oh, don't lie to me. I know you've picked your nose. I said, this is actually just like that. I said, you don't cry when you pick your nose. It's going to be okay. And so, laughing and also understanding that if a child doesn't want to do it today, there's always tomorrow. I think, they got used to it. They got used to seeing their friends, their classmates go through it, and they're like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't cry so much, or maybe I should try this. So I will tell you, this has been a wonderful experience for me, though. I have said this, to Leah, and I'm going to say it publicly, to Ken. This has really been just a blessed experience for me, because it showed me again that the joy that I had in public health work. And so I really want to thank both Rockefeller and Friendship for the opportunity.
We thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Yeah, and I'll just say, for Rockefeller's part, we, over the past year, we've learned a lot about K-12 testing, but most of all, we've been I guess, again, honored and privileged to be able to set the stage for people to do this good work. So thank you.
My only advice is take advantage of all the resources that Rockefeller and others have put out there. I mean, I will say, when we started this a little journey together, there wasn't a lot out there. So, it was walking in the dark with a very dim light. And, we relied on CORE for their expertise in public health. We relied on Leah for all the resources that she could bring to the table. But there were many instances where we were building and flying all at the same time. So I would say at this point, 16 months out, there are so many resources for people to use, from, Hadaway has an excellent communication toolkit. I mean, the playbooks that are out there for people to utilize. If we would have had those resources, I think when we started, we still would have needed CORE, so don't get me wrong. But it certainly would have given us a different playing field in which to play by, for lack of a better word. So take advantage of all of those resources.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for the panelists. We will make sure Caroline will be sending to everyone who attended and registered for this webinar all those resources that we were just mentioning throughout the call. And yes, thank you, Caroline. Join us August 11th for our next session. But we want to thank everyone for their time and making the effort to join here today. And thank you all for our panelists for such a great discussion we all had here today. Thank you all.